The NBA Cup is heating up, and Friday, November 7, 2025, is loaded with action across the league. From superstar showdowns to trap spots, underdog value plays, and must-watch bounce-back games, we're breaking down all matchups with in-depth analysis, betting angles, and the best spots to cash in. Let's dive straight into the numbers and find out who's primed to dominate tonight's slate. The Milwaukee Bucks face off against the Chicago Bulls in an exciting NBA Cup matchup on Friday, November 7, 2025, and this one promises to be a battle of pace, efficiency, and momentum. The Bulls are off to a blazing start this season, sitting at 6-1 straight up and 5-1 against the spread. They've already made their mark in the NBA Cup with an impressive win over the New York Knicks, while Milwaukee is entering its first NBA Cup contest looking to set the tone early. Both teams are eager to make a statement, and with the Bucks at home, this matchup brings all the ingredients for a high-energy showdown between two Eastern Conference contenders. The key focus for Milwaukee, as always, revolves around the availability and health of Giannis Antetokounmpo. He remains the heart of the team's success, and Milwaukee's performance usually mirrors his presence on the court. When Giannis is healthy, the Bucks dominate with their transition offense and defensive intensity. However, we've seen flashes of inconsistency from this Milwaukee squad, particularly in that recent loss to the Toronto Raptors where they surrendered 128 points on the road. That performance raised some questions about their defensive structure and ability to contain quick, athletic teams that thrive in transition. Chicago, meanwhile, has been one of the league's biggest surprises early in the season. They've been running the floor with confidence, sharing the ball, and executing at an elite offensive level. Currently ranked 6th in the NBA in overall field goal percentage and 2nd in three-point shooting, the Bulls have built an identity around speed, spacing, and precision. Their balance between perimeter shooting and aggressive drives has given defenses nightmares, and they're showing no signs of slowing down. Even from the free throw line, the Bulls have been above average, which makes them dangerous in late-game situations. Averaging just outside the top 5 in points per game, Chicago's offense is firing on all cylinders, and the chemistry among their young core has been noticeable. What's equally impressive about Chicago is their defensive improvement. They've climbed near league average in field goal defense and are currently 6th in defending the three-point line, a critical factor heading into a matchup with Milwaukee, a team that relies heavily on perimeter shooting to complement Giannis's paint dominance. Chicago's discipline in closing out shooters and their improved communication on defense have been key in holding opponents under control. This combination of offensive efficiency and defensive toughness has given the Bulls legitimate credibility as an emerging threat in the Eastern Conference, potentially positioning them for a top 6 playoff seed if they continue at this pace. Milwaukee, on the other hand, is still finding its rhythm. They've been solid offensively, ranking 3rd in overall three-point shooting percentage and 7th in perimeter efficiency. Damian Lillard's playmaking and perimeter scoring have added depth to their offensive scheme, but the Bucks have yet to find the defensive consistency that defined them in past seasons. Allowing 128 points to Toronto highlighted their struggles in transition defense and their tendency to give up easy looks on the perimeter. Against a hot shooting Bulls team, that's a formula that could get them in trouble quickly if they can't control tempo and rotations. When comparing these two squads, the contrast in current form stands out. Chicago is playing with rhythm, confidence, and cohesion, while Milwaukee, despite its individual talent, still looks like it's working through early season adjustments. The Bulls' ability to push the pace and knock down shots from deep makes them a tough team to put away, even against stronger rosters on paper. And with the way they've been defending the arc, they match up well against Milwaukee's biggest offensive weapon, their perimeter shooting. Given how these trends align, the Bulls appear to have value as underdogs in this matchup. Catching more than a possession's worth of points makes them an appealing play, especially considering their early season momentum and balance on both ends of the floor. Milwaukee may have the home court advantage and star power, but Chicago's chemistry, shooting, and defensive energy give them a realistic shot not only to cover the spread but to potentially pull off the outright win. This NBA Cup matchup between the Bucks and Bulls is shaping up to be one of the more intriguing games of the night, a true test of whether Milwaukee can bounce back from its defensive lapses and whether Chicago's early season surge is sustainable against top-tier competition. Expect a competitive game where both offenses shine, but the Bulls' cohesion and perimeter efficiency could be the difference that keeps this one tight until the final buzzer. Next is the Brooklyn Nets take on the Detroit Pistons. This matchup brings together two teams heading in very different directions to start the season. Brooklyn enters this game with a disappointing 1-7 record, struggling both straight up and against the spread at 3-5. They've yet to establish any rhythm offensively or defensively, and even home court advantage hasn't done them any favors as they remain winless in their own building at 0-4. On the other hand, the Detroit Pistons have come out hot, sitting at 6-2 straight up and against the spread, and they're looking like a team that's quickly finding its identity. Detroit's balanced roster and strong start have them positioned as an early season surprise, while Brooklyn continues to search for stability and consistency in its rotations. This NBA Cup matchup carries extra weight because of how the tournament format emphasizes point differential. In cases where teams are tied within their groups, the margin of victory can determine advancement, which often encourages teams to keep pushing even when leading comfortably. For that reason, Detroit is expected to come into this one focused on not just winning, but doing so convincingly. The Pistons are coming off an impressive 109-108 victory over the Philadelphia 76ers in their Cup opener, a game that showcased their late-game composure and improved defensive execution. That win extended their current 4-game winning streak and solidified their place as one of the most consistent teams in the East through the early stages of the season. Brooklyn, meanwhile, continues to struggle on both ends of the floor. The Nets opened the season with competitive efforts against Cleveland and Atlanta, losing those games by just 7 and 5 points respectively, but things quickly spiraled from there. Heavy losses to Philadelphia by 24 and to Minnesota by 16 exposed Brooklyn's weaknesses: poor perimeter defense, inconsistent ball movement, and an inability to close out quarters. Their only bright spot came in their most recent outing, where they picked up their first win of the year against the Indiana Pacers. However, even that victory felt more like a temporary reprieve than a true turning point. The Nets still lack cohesion, and while individual players have shown flashes of potential, the team as a whole hasn't been able to string together consistent performances. Detroit, in contrast, looks confident and composed. They've been winning games both at home and on the road, showing the kind of maturity you expect from a team that's developing a strong identity. Their recent wins include an 8-point victory over Memphis on the road and decisive home triumphs over Dallas and Orlando by 12 and 19 points respectively. Even in their road contests this year, the Pistons have displayed reliability, winning by 8, 4, and 4 points in matchups against Chicago, Houston, and Memphis. That level of consistency suggests a team that knows how to manage different game situations and adjust effectively on the fly. What stands out most about Detroit's early season success is their balanced play on both ends of the court. The young Pistons are moving the ball efficiently, sharing the scoring load, and showing patience in half-court sets. Their defense has also taken a noticeable step forward, particularly in closing out shooters and forcing turnovers. Cade Cunningham's leadership at the point guard position continues to grow, and the supporting cast around him, players like Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Ausar Thompson, has stepped up in key moments. Detroit's ability to rebound and control tempo has given them an edge against teams still trying to find their rhythm, like Brooklyn. For the Nets, the problems are more foundational. Despite a decent showing from Mikal Bridges and some solid individual efforts from Cam Thomas, the team hasn't found a consistent go-to strategy. Offensively, they've struggled to maintain spacing and rhythm, often relying too heavily on isolation plays. Defensively, their perimeter coverage has been suspect, allowing too many open looks from deep. Combine that with their inability to protect leads, and it's clear that Brooklyn has a lot to fix before they can start competing with teams like Detroit that are already executing at a high level. Given how both teams are trending, it's hard to justify backing Brooklyn in this spot without a substantial spread in their favor. Detroit's chemistry, confidence, and discipline make them the more reliable side. Additionally, because point differential matters in NBA Cup play, the Pistons have every incentive to keep pushing the pace and building their lead even if they're comfortably ahead late in the game. This format rewards aggressive play, and Detroit's combination of depth and hunger to prove themselves fits perfectly with that mindset. The Pistons appear poised to keep their momentum rolling. They've shown the ability to adapt to different opponents, maintain defensive intensity, and close out games efficiently. Against a Brooklyn team that has struggled mightily on its home floor and continues to search for its first consistent stretch of good basketball, Detroit holds a significant advantage in both form and confidence. Expect the Pistons to continue their strong run, cover the spread, and potentially dominate a matchup that highlights just how far these two teams are apart in their current trajectories. Next there is the Dallas Mavericks and the Memphis Grizzlies. Both teams enter this contest struggling to find their rhythm early in the season, and this game could be a defining one for either side. The Grizzlies are 0-1 in NBA Cup play after dropping their first matchup to the Los Angeles Lakers, while the Mavericks are still waiting to take the floor in this tournament. Neither team has looked convincing so far in regular season play. Dallas sits at 2-6 straight up and 3-5 against the spread, while Memphis isn't much better at 3-6 straight up and 2-7 against the number. It's been a tough stretch for both squads as they try to climb out of the early season slump. The Mavericks' struggles have been particularly concerning. They've had a rough time closing out games and putting up points. Scoring just 99 in a 2-point home loss to the Pelicans as 8.5-point favorites was a red flag. On top of that, Dallas suffered outright losses to Houston and Detroit, two games they were expected to handle comfortably, and also dropped contests against OKC, Washington, and San Antonio. Those are the kinds of losses that point to deeper issues within the team's structure and execution. The Mavericks' only wins have come against Indiana and Toronto, two teams that have had their own inconsistencies. So far, there's no clear identity from Dallas, and that's a worrying sign this far into the season. One major storyline for the Mavericks is the emergence of Cooper Flagg. The young forward has shown flashes of brilliance and looks like a future star, but the team is asking too much of him too soon. With Kyrie Irving injured and Anthony Davis banged up, Dallas has been forced to rely on Flagg to carry a heavier load offensively and defensively. While he's handled it admirably, it's a tall order for a player still adjusting to the league's pace and physicality. The team's veteran leadership needs to step up, because right now, the Mavericks look lost in key stretches of games, and their late-game execution is one of the weakest in the conference. On the other side, the Memphis Grizzlies are dealing with their own set of problems. They've dropped 4 straight games and, much like Dallas, have struggled mightily to score. During this losing streak, they've failed to break 112 points in any game, and since opening night, they've only topped 120 once. That's not the kind of offensive output you expect from a team that used to hang its hat on fast tempo and strong ball movement. Injuries, lineup changes, and inconsistent guard play have all contributed to Memphis's offensive woes. They've been grinding through games without a reliable scorer to close things out, and it's showing in their results. Defensively, the Grizzlies have remained competitive but not dominant. They're allowing just enough second-chance points and transition buckets to swing games against them. The Mavericks, meanwhile, have shifted their approach in recent outings. Knowing that their offense isn't clicking, they've tried to slow the game down and keep opponents from scoring. Dallas has allowed 110 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, suggesting that they're intentionally trying to play in the mud, dragging teams into low-scoring, defensive battles. This strategy hasn't led to many wins yet, but it's at least given them a fighting chance in games where their offense has disappeared. Given how both teams have performed, this matchup has the makings of a low-scoring grind. The Grizzlies can't seem to find consistent offense, while the Mavericks can't finish possessions cleanly or shoot with rhythm. Normally, when you see Dallas versus Memphis on the schedule, you expect fireworks and a fast-paced shootout between star guards and dynamic wings. But this time, it's likely to be the opposite. Both teams are desperate to stop the bleeding, and that desperation often leads to slower, more physical basketball. Neither team has been able to establish a strong home court or road identity, and that uncertainty makes this game difficult to handicap. However, recent trends suggest that the under could be the smarter angle. Both sides are leaning on defense out of necessity rather than strength, and both are searching for someone to spark their offenses. Until one of these teams shows that they can score efficiently and consistently, it's hard to trust either side to light up the scoreboard. Expect a choppy, defensive battle with plenty of missed shots, long possessions, and grind-it-out sequences that keep the total score under the number. This is a matchup between two teams looking for answers early in the season. The Mavericks are trying to rediscover their offensive flow while waiting for their stars to return to full health, and the Grizzlies are fighting to regain the intensity that made them one of the most competitive teams in the West in recent years. Both have talent, but both are flawed right now. With two underperforming squads facing off, the safer play leans toward a slow-paced, defensive-minded contest rather than an offensive showcase. Next is the Denver Nuggets face off against the Golden State Warriors in a highly anticipated matchup. These two Western Conference powerhouses have already shown flashes of brilliance early in the season, but both have also had moments where inconsistency has crept in. For Denver, this game is a chance to bounce back after a narrow 109-107 loss to Portland in their NBA Cup debut. For Golden State, it's their first opportunity to make a statement in Cup play. Each team knows the importance of these early tournament games, not just for momentum, but for potential tiebreakers later on, where point differential can be crucial. Golden State enters this matchup at 5-4 both straight up and against the spread. They've been competitive in most of their games, but several of their losses have raised questions about their defensive focus and ability to close out games. The Warriors are coming off a 121-116 loss to the Sacramento Kings, a contest that was tighter than expected but highlighted their struggles when key players are missing. Their previous losses include a shocking defeat to Indiana as 11-point road favorites and a lopsided performance against Milwaukee. That game saw Ryan Rollins, ironically a former Warrior, drop 32 points against his old team, a reminder that Golden State's defense isn't what it used to be. The biggest storyline for the Warriors revolves around their superstar Stephen Curry, who's currently listed as day-to-day with an illness. Curry didn't suit up against the Kings, and his absence was deeply felt. Without him, Golden State's offensive rhythm faltered. They struggled to create high-quality shots, and their spacing was off without his gravity-pulling defenders to the perimeter. Jimmy Butler also missed that game, and Draymond Green was sidelined, leaving the Warriors with a bare-bones rotation that simply couldn't keep pace late in the fourth quarter. Even if those players return for this matchup, there are still legitimate concerns about Golden State's consistency and chemistry. On the other hand, the Denver Nuggets continue to look like one of the toughest teams to beat at home. Sitting at 5-2 straight up and 4-3 against the number, Denver has been largely reliable, anchored by the brilliance of Nikola Jokic. As long as Jokic is healthy and in the lineup, Denver's offense remains one of the most efficient in the league. His combination of elite scoring, vision, and leadership makes the Nuggets a nightmare matchup, especially in front of their home fans. Denver's balance and discipline often allow them to outlast opponents, particularly teams like Golden State that rely heavily on perimeter shooting and rhythm-based offense. When these two teams met earlier in the season on October 23, Golden State pulled off a 137-131 overtime win, a thrilling shootout that showcased both teams' offensive potential. However, it's important to remember that Denver historically performs far better at home. The altitude in Ball Arena, combined with Denver's physical style and tactical patience, tends to wear opponents down over the course of 4 quarters. The Nuggets have a history of bouncing back strong after tough losses, and after the disappointment against Portland, this is a prime spot for them to reassert their dominance. Golden State's status as a profitable road underdog in past seasons can't be ignored, but this version of the team feels different. The Warriors are older, less athletic, and heavily dependent on Curry's availability. Without him, their offensive ceiling drops dramatically. Even with Draymond Green expected to return and Jimmy Butler listed as questionable, the team's chemistry issues persist. Their bench production has been inconsistent, and the defensive rotations often break down when opponents move the ball quickly through the half-court. Against a Denver team that thrives on precision passing and exploiting mismatches, that could prove costly. For Denver, the formula remains simple. Get Jokic involved early, control the pace, and dominate the glass. When Jokic is orchestrating the offense, players like Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. benefit from open looks and cutting lanes. The Nuggets' depth is another key factor. They've shown they can get contributions from multiple players, and their defensive rotations have tightened up compared to earlier in the season. At home, they tend to dictate tempo and force teams like Golden State to play their brand of basketball, slower, more methodical, and heavily reliant on execution. This matchup ultimately comes down to availability and discipline. If Curry remains sidelined, Golden State's offense could sputter again, especially against a Denver defense that knows how to protect the paint and contest shooters without fouling. Even if Curry plays, the Warriors will have to shoot exceptionally well from beyond the arc to keep pace. Meanwhile, Denver's interior presence, rebounding edge, and half-court efficiency give them a clear advantage. Given the current reports, it looks like Curry will be ruled out once again, with Draymond probable and Butler still uncertain. That scenario heavily favors the Nuggets. When Denver has its full lineup healthy and Jokic leading the charge, they're one of the most complete teams in basketball, especially on their home floor. The Nuggets have had a few blips this season, but their overall consistency, composure, and ability to close out games give them the upper hand. Expect Denver to control this matchup, limit Golden State's rhythm, and come away with a decisive win at home. Next, the Cleveland Cavaliers take on the Washington Wizards. Both teams enter this contest on opposite ends of the performance spectrum, with Cleveland looking to build on some recent momentum while Washington continues to search for answers on both ends of the floor. The Cavaliers come into this game with a 5-3 straight-up record, though they've struggled against the spread at 2-6. The Wizards, meanwhile, have had a disastrous start to the season at 1-7 both straight up and against the number. It's been a season of inconsistency for Cleveland and one of frustration for Washington, and this NBA Cup meeting could be an early tone setter for both squads as they look to define their identity. Cleveland's NBA Cup campaign didn't start as planned, dropping their first matchup against the Toronto Raptors. However, the Cavaliers have bounced back since then, picking up back-to-back wins to get their confidence trending in the right direction. The problem with Cleveland isn't their talent, it's their inconsistency when laying big numbers. Bettors have learned the hard way that this team can look dominant in one game and flat the next. Even when they win, it's often a coin flip on whether they cover the spread. The Cavaliers have only managed to win by double digits twice this season, which makes trusting them as large favorites risky. Still, against a struggling Wizards team, Cleveland has an opportunity to prove they can handle business in games they're supposed to win. Cleveland's most recent win came against Philadelphia in a game that highlighted both their potential and their unpredictability. The Cavaliers were laying a big number, around 10.5 points depending on where the line closed, and ended up winning by 11. For some bettors, that was just enough to cash. For others, it was a heartbreaking near miss. That's been the story of Cleveland's season so far. A talented team that doesn't always play to its full potential but is capable of pulling away when everything clicks. The Cavaliers have shown flashes of dominance, but there have also been letdowns that remind fans this is still a team learning how to consistently close out opponents. The Washington Wizards, on the other hand, continue to be one of the league's most unpredictable and least trustworthy teams. Their betting trend has become almost comically simple. If you think the Wizards will win, take them on the money line. If you don't, fade them hard and take the other side by double digits. This pattern has held true all season. When Washington loses, they tend to lose big. Their lone win came in a spot where they managed to outshoot an opponent in transition-heavy play, but most of their games have quickly unraveled once defensive breakdowns start to pile up. Their recent matchup against the Boston Celtics was a perfect example. Washington actually led by 11 points after the first quarter, showing flashes of offensive potential. But by halftime, the game had flipped completely. Boston was up 70-60, and the Wizards simply fell apart from there. The Celtics went on to hang 136 points on them, another defensive collapse that underscores Washington's inability to sustain energy and effort for a full 4 quarters. Even when they start strong, the Wizards lack the composure and defensive discipline to close games against elite or even above-average teams. This kind of inconsistency makes it nearly impossible to trust Washington in a matchup like this. Cleveland has dominated the recent series history between these two teams, sweeping last season's meetings in convincing fashion. The Cavaliers' margins of victory tell the story clearly: wins by 19, 31, 10, and 10 points last year. Washington managed to cover in a few of those games only when the spreads were extremely large, 16.5 and 17.5 points, but even then, the games were never truly in doubt. The Cavaliers controlled the tempo, dictated the physicality, and exploited Washington's defensive inefficiencies with ease. Heading into this game, there's no indication that anything has changed for the Wizards. Their defense continues to rank near the bottom of the league, and their inability to defend the perimeter or protect the paint consistently leaves them vulnerable to balanced offensive teams like Cleveland. The Cavaliers, meanwhile, have rediscovered some rhythm offensively, moving the ball better and getting more consistent scoring contributions beyond their top options. When Cleveland plays through its bigs and keeps its tempo under control, it can be one of the toughest teams to slow down in the half court. The challenge for Cleveland, of course, remains their inconsistency in covering spreads. But against Washington, that concern may not matter as much. The Wizards have yet to show that they can keep games close against competent competition. Their lone win doesn't inspire much confidence given how poorly they've defended overall. The Cavaliers, by contrast, have at least shown they can bounce back from rough performances and dominate inferior opponents when they stay focused. With Cleveland's recent form improving and Washington continuing to struggle on both ends, this game sets up as another potential blowout. Unless Washington drastically improves its defensive effort and finds a way to limit Cleveland's ball movement, it's hard to envision this one staying competitive deep into the fourth quarter. The Wizards simply don't have the defensive cohesion or interior presence to contain Cleveland's attack for 48 minutes. The Cavaliers' combination of size, rebounding, and shot-making should give them a steady edge throughout the night. Cleveland's pattern of alternating strong and flat performances might make some bettors hesitant, but against a team as lost as Washington, the Cavaliers should have little trouble pulling away. The Wizards will need near-perfect offensive execution to keep up, and their track record suggests that's unlikely. Cleveland has owned this matchup, and until Washington proves otherwise, the most logical play remains backing the Cavaliers to win comfortably. Expect Cleveland to continue its dominance over Washington and deliver another double-digit victory as they look to climb back into form early in the season. Next, the Boston Celtics head to Florida to take on the Orlando Magic. Both teams come into this matchup looking to find some rhythm after inconsistent starts to the season. For the Magic, the expectations were high coming into the year, especially after adding Desmond Bane to a young, talented core that already featured Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs. On paper, this starting five has the potential to compete in the Eastern Conference, but so far, the results haven't lived up to the hype. Orlando currently sits at 3-5 straight up and 2-6 against the spread, numbers that show just how difficult it's been for bettors to trust this team. The biggest issue for the Magic has been their lack of cohesion on both ends of the floor. Offensively, there's no consistent flow. Possessions often end with isolation plays or low-percentage jump shots rather than ball movement and rhythm scoring. Defensively, the team has struggled to contain perimeter shooters and prevent second-chance opportunities, a sign of both defensive lapses and lack of hustle in key moments. The effort is there from players like Jalen Suggs, who continues to bring energy and intensity every night, but that same level of urgency isn't being matched across the roster. Their wins this season came against the Miami Heat, Charlotte Hornets, and Washington Wizards. Beating the Heat to open the season was an encouraging sign, but since then, Orlando has dropped 4 straight and followed that stretch with 2 wins over struggling teams before being blown out by the Atlanta Hawks in their most recent game. That loss exposed many of the same flaws that have plagued the Magic all season: inconsistent defense, poor transition coverage, and long stretches of stagnant offense where their young stars go cold simultaneously. On the other side, the Boston Celtics haven't been much better record-wise, sitting at 4-5 straight up and 3-6 against the spread, but they've shown flashes of their identity under pressure. Even without Jason Tatum, who's missed time, Boston has remained competitive thanks to Jaylen Brown's stellar play. Brown has been the clear driving force behind Boston's offense, attacking defenses with confidence, scoring from all 3 levels, and setting the tone with his intensity. His consistency has been remarkable. If you've been betting his points prop every night, you've been cashing tickets consistently. Boston's biggest issue this season has been their heavy reliance on the 3-point shot. This is a team that lives and dies by the long ball. When the Celtics are hitting from deep, they can go toe-to-toe with any team in the league, as shown in their 109-108 road win over the Philadelphia 76ers. But when those shots aren't falling, the offense dries up fast, and the lack of inside scoring becomes a glaring weakness. This makes Boston unpredictable at times, but when players like Brown, Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard are connecting from deep, this team becomes a nightmare to defend. Heading into this matchup, Boston looks like the more trustworthy side despite being the underdog. The Celtics have the talent, the playoff experience, and a proven leader in Jaylen Brown who's playing some of the best basketball of his career. Meanwhile, Orlando has yet to show they can perform consistently enough to justify being a favorite, even at home. The Magic's defense hasn't held up against faster-paced teams, and their offense hasn't been efficient enough to capitalize on weak stretches from opponents. This feels like the kind of game where Brown takes over again, putting up another strong scoring performance and leading the Celtics to either cover or win outright. If you're looking for a player prop angle, Brown's over on points remains one of the best bets on the board until he cools off. Orlando may have the home court advantage, but Boston's balance and shot-making ability should keep them in control. Given how the Magic have struggled to cover spreads this year, taking the Celtics plus the points looks like the smarter play. Until Orlando proves they can handle teams with veteran leadership and shot creation like Boston, it's tough to back them confidently. The Celtics' ability to bounce back after losses and execute late in games gives them a clear edge. Expect a focused performance from Boston, led once again by Jaylen Brown, as they look to get back on track in the early stages of the NBA Cup. Next, there is a Western Conference matchup between the Utah Jazz and the Minnesota Timberwolves. This game presents an interesting scheduling wrinkle, as it marks Utah's 5th straight road game before heading home to face this same Minnesota team again on November 10th. For bettors and fans alike, it's a spot that tests both endurance and consistency, 2 qualities that could separate these teams as they try to build early season momentum. Utah's road trip has taken them through Phoenix, Charlotte, Boston, and Detroit, a mix of competition levels that's made them one of the more battle-tested squads early in the season. Despite being on the losing end in several of those matchups, the Jazz have shown flashes of resilience, particularly against the spread. They sit at a respectable 5-3 ATS, proving that while they might not always win outright, they often play opponents tougher than the line suggests. One major setback for the Jazz, though, is the loss of Walker Kessler, who is out for the season. His absence leaves a massive hole in the paint, both defensively and on the boards. Kessler had been one of Utah's key interior defenders, and without him, the Jazz have had to rely more heavily on smaller rotations and faster pace to stay competitive. George Niang's status is also up in the air for this one, as he remains questionable. That means players like Lauri Markkanen and Jordan Clarkson will need to shoulder more of the offensive load. Markkanen, in particular, has been Utah's stabilizing force, a versatile forward who can stretch the floor and keep the team in games with his scoring consistency. The Minnesota Timberwolves, on the other hand, are still searching for their identity this season. They come into this game 4-4 straight up and 2-6 against the spread, an underwhelming mark for a team that's received plenty of respect from oddsmakers. Minnesota just wrapped up an East Coast road trip that included stops in Charlotte, Brooklyn, and New York, finishing with a disappointing 23-point blowout loss to the Knicks. That game was close for much of the night until the fourth quarter, when New York's bench depth and late-game execution completely overwhelmed the Wolves. The good news for Minnesota is the return of their star guard Anthony Edwards, who missed several games earlier in the season but returned for their last outing. With Edwards healthy again, the Timberwolves' offense immediately regains its spark. Alongside Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, Minnesota has one of the most physically imposing front courts in the league. Still, this team's biggest problem has been consistency, particularly when it comes to covering large spreads. Minnesota has been prone to playing down to the level of their competition, a trend that's burned bettors in several spots. Earlier this season, they were laying 12 points against the Pacers and barely managed to escape with a win. They were also favored by 7.5 against the Lakers, a game where they ended up losing outright despite the opposing team being without Luka Doncic. These are the kinds of performances that make it tough to trust Minnesota as a heavy favorite. On paper, the Timberwolves have everything you'd want in a contender: elite rim protection with Gobert, floor spacing from Towns, and dynamic scoring from Edwards. But the problem lies in translating that talent into dominance night in and night out. Too often, this team coasts against opponents they're supposed to handle easily, leading to narrow victories or even surprising upsets. That's why, for bettors, laying double digits with Minnesota is a risky proposition, especially against a team as scrappy and persistent as Utah. The Jazz may not have the star power or the defensive presence they once did, but what they lack in top-end talent, they make up for in effort and execution. They've been playing together as a cohesive unit, moving the ball well and getting solid contributions from role players like Colin Sexton and John Collins. Even in tough matchups, they've managed to keep games competitive with timely shooting and hustle plays that frustrate more talented teams. Given the current form of both squads, the smarter play looks to be taking Utah with the points. The Timberwolves, while talented, have not shown enough consistency to justify being such large favorites, especially coming off a disappointing road trip. The Jazz, meanwhile, continue to cover numbers despite being counted out by oddsmakers. In a spot like this, fifth straight road game for Utah, with a revenge angle waiting back home in a few days, motivation and discipline become key. Utah has proven they won't roll over easily. Minnesota's offense may surge early with Edwards back in the lineup, but the Jazz have shown they can hang around, particularly when Markkanen is hitting shots and their bench provides a spark. Expect Utah to make this one competitive, using their grit and tempo to keep it within the number. While the Timberwolves might ultimately grab the win, the Jazz's ability to cover spreads makes them the more reliable side to back in this matchup. Next, the Charlotte Hornets travel to South Beach to take on the Miami Heat in NBA Cup action, a matchup that heavily favors Miami both historically and stylistically. These two teams last faced each other on October 28, and that game wasn't even close. The Heat completely dominated from start to finish, cruising to a 144-117 blowout victory. Miami's offensive execution was sharp, their spacing near perfect, and their defensive rotations stifled nearly every Hornets possession. It was one of those performances that made it clear just how far apart these two teams currently are in terms of consistency and maturity. Heading into this rematch, the line once again favors Miami, sitting around -5.5. But this game comes with plenty of variables tied to injuries that could dramatically affect both teams' outlook. For Charlotte, the biggest concern is the status of LaMelo Ball, who remains questionable. Ball is the engine that drives this Hornets offense, the heart and soul of their system. When he's on the floor, the Hornets' pace, creativity, and spacing all take a leap forward. But without him, this team looks stagnant. The ball sticks in isolation plays, transition opportunities vanish, and their three-point looks become far less efficient. The Hornets are also dealing with several other key injuries. Grant Williams and Josh Green are both listed as questionable, and rookie Brandon Miller remains sidelined. Without those pieces, Charlotte loses not only scoring depth but also the ability to stretch the floor effectively. When you combine that with a lack of interior presence and inconsistent perimeter defense, the challenge of facing a disciplined Heat squad on the road becomes monumental. For Miami, there are also some injury concerns, though their depth helps cushion the blow. Tyler Herro remains out, and Bam Adebayo will miss this matchup after leaving their previous game against the Denver Nuggets early with an injury. Losing Bam hurts significantly. He's the defensive anchor, the switch-heavy centerpiece who allows Miami to control tempo and protect the rim while still closing out on shooters. Without him, Miami loses a lot of its pick-and-roll coverage and rebounding edge. Still, Miami's system and player development culture tend to keep them competitive even when key pieces are missing. Norman Powell's arrival has already proven to be a valuable addition, especially with Herro out. Powell provides instant offense, a capable three-level scorer who can get his own shot and keep the spacing intact. His ability to attack closeouts and generate secondary scoring opportunities fits seamlessly into the Heat's motion-heavy offense. Additionally, the acquisition of Davion Mitchell has injected some much-needed energy and defensive grit into their backcourt rotation. Mitchell's on-ball pressure and quick hands could prove vital against a Hornets team that's turnover-prone when LaMelo isn't orchestrating. The Heat return home after a grueling 4-game West Coast road trip that saw them face the Clippers, Lakers, and Nuggets, a challenging stretch by any measure. Despite the tough competition, Miami managed to hold their own and now returns to their home floor, where they remain undefeated this season. Home court advantage has historically been massive for this team, largely because of the discipline and energy they bring defensively in front of the Miami crowd. History is also heavily on the side of the Heat. Over the last 68 meetings between these two franchises, Miami has won 51 of them, a staggering 75% win rate. It's been one of the most one-sided head-to-head records in the Eastern Conference over the last decade. Even as both teams have undergone roster changes, the trend has remained consistent. Miami dominates this matchup. Their defensive structure seems to frustrate Charlotte's rhythm every time, forcing the Hornets into low-percentage shots and long stretches of offensive droughts. For Charlotte to have any real chance, they'll need LaMelo Ball not only to play but to control the pace of the game. The Hornets thrive when they can get out in transition, pushing tempo and catching opponents off guard. But Miami's disciplined half-court defense and ability to slow down games make that an uphill battle. If LaMelo sits, Charlotte's offense becomes almost entirely dependent on secondary scorers like Terry Rozier and Miles Bridges. players who can get hot but struggle to carry an entire offensive load against elite defensive teams. Miami's offensive identity this season has been built around ball movement, spacing, and opportunistic scoring. Even without Bam, their small ball sets have looked fluid, largely because of how seamlessly role players like Caleb Martin and Duncan Robinson have filled in. Both have the ability to stretch the floor and open up driving lanes for Powell and Jimmy Butler. Miami's rotations have been sharp, and their spacing makes it difficult for defenses to collapse without giving up clean perimeter looks. From a betting standpoint, the situation sets up nicely for Miami once again. If LaMelo Ball is ruled out before tip-off, the line is almost certain to move several points in Miami's favor, possibly climbing to -7 or higher. That's why timing is critical. Bettors looking to back the Heat would be wise to lock in the -5.5 early before the line adjustment. With Miami's recent form, their home court advantage, and the glaring uncertainty surrounding Charlotte's key players, this looks like a prime opportunity for the Heat to handle business again. Even without Bam Adebayo, Miami's depth and experience should carry them through. Their defensive intensity, combined with efficient shot-making from Norman Powell and leadership from Jimmy Butler, makes them the more reliable side. Meanwhile, Charlotte has too many question marks, both in terms of health and chemistry, to inspire confidence in this spot. Given how lopsided their previous meeting was and how well the Heat have performed at home, Miami appears poised to take control of this matchup once more and cover the spread comfortably. Next, the Toronto Raptors and Atlanta Hawks face off in an intriguing NBA Cup matchup. The Raptors come into this game as slight favorites at around 1.5 points, and for good reason. They've had the upper hand in this head-to-head series recently. Toronto has won the last 3 meetings between these two teams and has gone 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 games versus Atlanta. That consistency shows that the Raptors have historically matched up well against the Hawks, and current form suggests that trend could continue. Toronto enters this contest red-hot, riding a 3-game winning streak and playing with the kind of confidence that makes them dangerous on both ends of the floor. They're coming off an impressive 28-point blowout win over the Milwaukee Bucks, a game where everything clicked. The Raptors took advantage of a tough scheduling spot for the Bucks, who were coming off an emotional buzzer-beater win against the Pacers the night before, but still, winning by nearly 30 against a contender says something about how locked in this team is. Before that, they went on the road to beat Cleveland and then handled Memphis by 13 points, even though Ja Morant didn't play. Still, the point stands. This Raptors group is finding rhythm, balance, and chemistry, especially with their new mix of talent. Looking at Toronto's lineup, it's clear this is a team built with scoring versatility in mind. Scotty Barnes continues to take steps forward as a leader, impacting the game in multiple ways. Emmanuel Quickley and R.J. Barrett bring offensive punch and pace, while Brandon Ingram gives the Raptors a smooth scoring option on the wing capable of taking over late in games. This mix of young energy and veteran poise gives Toronto a well-rounded attack that's tough to game plan against. On the other hand, Atlanta enters this matchup with some question marks, most notably, the status of star guard Trae Young. He missed their last game, and all signs point to him being out once again. Without Young, the Hawks lose not just their leading scorer, but their offensive engine. The Hawks did manage to pick up a solid win over the Orlando Magic as 3.5-point underdogs, winning outright by 15, but sustaining that kind of performance without Trae is difficult against a team as balanced as the Raptors. Jalen Johnson has stepped up admirably for Atlanta, showing flashes of his growing potential, but he can only do so much when the team's primary playmaker and shot creator is unavailable. The Hawks' supporting cast, while talented, struggles to maintain offensive flow and shot quality without Young orchestrating the attack. That's a major concern going up against a Toronto defense that has been forcing turnovers and limiting second-chance opportunities during this winning stretch. The situational factors also favor the Raptors here. They're coming off a stretch of confidence-building wins and are healthy at key positions, while the Hawks are missing their most important player. If this line were set purely on team strength without Young in the lineup, it probably should be closer to Raptors -3.5 instead of -1.5. That small number gives Toronto bettors solid value on either the spread or the money line. Momentum, health, and matchup history all point toward Toronto. Their recent dominance in this series, coupled with their strong form over the last week, gives them a legitimate edge. The Hawks simply don't have enough firepower to keep up for 4 quarters without their star guard. Expect the Raptors to continue rolling, pushing their win streak to 4 games with another solid performance built on balance, defensive energy, and scoring versatility. Toronto looks like the sharper side here. Whether you take them on the money line or lay the small number, the edge clearly belongs to the Raptors. Next there is the Houston Rockets and San Antonio Spurs, a game between two franchises that don't particularly like each other and two young cores moving rapidly toward relevance. San Antonio enters this matchup after a tough but competitive outing against the Los Angeles Lakers, where they covered the short spread and showed flashes of the discipline and growth that defined their strong start to the season. They opened the year 5-0 straight up and 5-0 against the spread, proving early that this young group is not just exciting, but fundamentally sound. Even though they've dropped their last 2 games, the Spurs still look like a team capable of making noise in the Western Conference. The Rockets, however, enter this game as one of the hottest teams in the NBA. Houston has won 5 straight games, and not just by squeaking by. They've gone into arenas like Toronto, Boston, and Memphis and walked out with impressive victories. This team has been firing on all cylinders offensively, putting up 120-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. What makes this run even more impressive is how quickly they've found chemistry despite having major roster changes heading into the season, including the addition of Kevin Durant. Many expected Houston to take time to gel, but instead, they've come out of the gate looking like a seasoned team with a clear identity and dangerous offensive rhythm. Houston's defense has also played a major role in their success. They're not only scoring efficiently, but they're locking teams down on the other end, creating a balanced, two-way attack that is hard to counter. Their length on the perimeter, improved rim protection, and overall commitment to defensive rotations have made them tough to score on in half-court sets. When you combine that with Durant's scoring, their guard play, and strong transition game, the Rockets have become one of the most complete and versatile teams in the league through the first stretch of the season. San Antonio, despite back-to-back losses, shouldn't be overlooked. They've shown resilience and a clear identity centered around youth, ball movement, and improved defensive effort. Returning home, where they have yet to lose, gives them a natural advantage, especially in a potential bounce-back scenario after 2 road defeats. The young Spurs continue to play with confidence, and the home crowd energy often elevates their tempo and intensity. That's what makes this matchup tricky. Houston has the momentum, but San Antonio has the situational edge and the kind of roster that can rise to the moment. The question ultimately becomes, do you back the scorching hot Rockets to keep rolling, or do you trust the Spurs to snap their losing streak in a strong home spot? Given how dominant Houston has been recently, blowing teams out, controlling pace, and consistently executing down the stretch, it's tough to fade them right now. The Rockets have shown that they not only win games but take command of them early and rarely let go. Sitting on a Spurs ticket while watching the Rockets pour in points would be a frustrating position for any bettor, especially with how well Houston has handled pressure moments. While San Antonio should not be discounted, and this is the kind of game they could absolutely win at home, Houston's form, depth, and all-around play are too strong to ignore. The Rockets have earned respect as a team that can compete with anyone in the league, and laying a short number on them feels justified. Until someone proves they can derail Houston's momentum, they remain the more trustworthy side. The Spurs will continue to be a team worth backing throughout the season, especially in strong scheduling spots. But right now, with Houston playing elite basketball on both ends and carrying confidence into every arena they enter, the Rockets look poised to extend their winning streak. Next is the Oklahoma City Thunder travel to Sacramento to face the Kings. The Thunder come into this game with one of the best starts in the league, sitting at 8-1 straight up, although they've been a bit inconsistent against the spread at 4-5. Their first loss of the season came on Wednesday against the Portland Trail Blazers, a game where situational fatigue clearly caught up to them. Oklahoma City had just played an intense matchup in Los Angeles against the Clippers and had to travel immediately to face a rested Portland squad. It was a tough turnaround spot, and the Trail Blazers took full advantage, handing the Thunder their first defeat. Despite that loss, there's no reason to lose confidence in this Thunder team. They've shown a complete game so far this season: strong perimeter defense, balanced scoring, and impressive execution from their young core. Their chemistry, energy, and overall cohesion have been their biggest strengths, and this matchup against the Kings offers a perfect opportunity for them to bounce back. The Thunder have historically dominated this matchup, winning each of their last 6 meetings against Sacramento, and they've shown that they know how to exploit the Kings' defensive lapses and inconsistencies. The Sacramento Kings, meanwhile, have had a rocky start to their season. Sitting at 3-5 straight up and 4-3-1 against the spread, this team hasn't found the rhythm that made them so dangerous just 2 years ago. They are coming off a solid win over the Golden State Warriors, a game where they handled business efficiently. It was a situational edge for Sacramento, as Golden State was on the back end of a back-to-back with travel. The Kings capitalized on that advantage, securing a much-needed victory, but there's still a sense that they're not playing up to their potential. Injuries have also played a role in Sacramento's uneven start. Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine are both listed as questionable for this game, while Keegan Murray remains out. Both Sabonis and LaVine missed the previous matchup against Golden State, and their availability will have a major impact on how competitive the Kings can be in this one. Without Sabonis's inside presence and LaVine's perimeter scoring, the Kings have struggled to maintain offensive flow and defensive stability. Their depth is decent, but against a deep and fast-paced Thunder team, missing key starters could be too much to overcome. On the other side, the Thunder could be getting healthier at just the right time. Chet Holmgren, who has been a critical piece for Oklahoma City on both ends, looks set to return, while Luguentz Dort and Alex Caruso are both questionable. The absence of Jalen Williams still hurts, as his versatility and shot creation are vital to the Thunder's second-unit success, but the potential return of multiple defensive anchors like Dort and Caruso would give OKC a huge lift, especially against a team that relies heavily on guard play. If the Thunder can put those pieces back on the floor, their defense immediately becomes one of the toughest in the league again: long, switchable, and relentless in transition coverage. This matchup comes down to momentum versus situation. The Thunder have been rolling, even in their loss, while the Kings remain difficult to trust, both because of injuries and because of their inconsistency against good teams. Sacramento was one of the league's worst cover teams last year, and early signs suggest that trend could continue. Oklahoma City, by contrast, has proven time and again that they can respond to losses with statement performances. Their ability to adapt after defeats, led by the maturity of their young core, has been impressive. Given the trends, this sets up as an ideal bounce-back spot for Oklahoma City. The Thunder's defensive length, energy, and ability to dictate tempo should cause problems for a Kings team that has struggled to sustain offensive rhythm. Sacramento's perimeter defense has been leaky, and if their stars remain sidelined, they'll have trouble containing Oklahoma City's dynamic guards and inside-out balance. It's also worth noting that the Thunder have simply had the Kings' number. They match up well stylistically, exploiting Sacramento's slower rotations and lack of rim protection. With the Thunder eager to wash away their first loss and continue building early season momentum, this looks like the right time to back them once again. Oklahoma City has been one of the league's most complete teams so far: disciplined, confident, and dangerous in transition, and they should have what it takes to cover and pick up a convincing win here. The Thunder should enter Sacramento with focus and fire, ready to reassert themselves after a rare off night. Laying the points looks justified, as their balanced attack and defensive edge give them every reason to be trusted in this matchup. That wraps up your full NBA breakdown for Friday's slate. If you enjoyed the analysis and want more daily predictions like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Beyond the Box Score, and turn on notifications so you never miss a pick. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let me know which team you're backing tonight, and as always, bet smart and enjoy the games.